Imagine a king whose ambitions dwarfed the borders of his realm. A ruler so powerful he dared to carve a permanent scar across the face of Britain. A monumental earthwork that remains the longest linear ancient monument in the world. Forget King Arthur, forget the Roman legions. In the murky, violent heart of the 8th century, there was Offa, King of Mercia, the Anglo-Saxon monarch who was arguably the first true king of the English, and whose immense, forgotten legacy is literally built into the ground we walk on. For centuries, history has reserved its loudest accolades for the kings who fought grand battles and left behind soaring cathedrals. But the story of Offa, reigned 757 to 796 AD, is one of silent, enduring power, a tale of strategic genius, naked ambition, and the sheer administrative might required to reshape the very landscape of the island of Britain. He wasn't just a king, he was a craftsman of nations, a diplomat of international repute, and a man whose rule was so absolute it inspired fear and respect from the misty shores of Wales to the glittering courts of mainland Europe. His greatest masterpiece? A colossal barrier known as Offa's Dyke. This wasn't merely a ditch or a defensive wall, it was a staggering feat of engineering. A boundary, a political statement, and a monument to absolute sovereignty that still runs for approximately 150 miles, 240 kilometers, along the modern border between England and Wales. It is a physical embodiment of a king's will, a line drawn in the earth separating the turbulent Celtic kingdoms from the consolidating power of Anglo-Saxon England. The anarchy of the Heptarchy, a king rises. To truly appreciate Offa's achievement, one must first understand the fractured, brutal world he inherited. The Britain of the 8th century was not a unified nation, but a patchwork of warring kingdoms, often called the Heptarchy, a term encompassing the 7 main Anglo-Saxon states: Northumbria, Mercia, East Anglia, Essex, Kent, Sussex, and Wessex. Mercia, nestled in the heart of the island, was a powerful, landlocked kingdom constantly vying for dominance. Offa seized the throne in a moment of political volatility, likely by force, following a civil war that followed the assassination of his cousin, King Æthelberht. His accession in 757 AD was less a coronation and more a challenge to every other claimant and neighboring ruler. From that moment, his reign became a relentless 50-year campaign to secure his power and expand Mercian authority until it became the dominant force, the overlordship, or Bretwalda, of all Anglo-Saxon England. The domination of Offa. Offa's consolidation of power was methodical and ruthless. He didn't just win battles, he absorbed kingdoms. The subjugation of Kent, 770s AD. Kent, with its strategic location and links to the continent, was brought under Mercian control after a decisive military campaign. Offa replaced local kings with his own ealdormen, or governors, fundamentally altering the political structure. The annexation of East Anglia. The fate of East Anglia's king Æthelberht II remains one of the darkest stains on Offa's reputation. Tradition holds that Æthelberht was murdered at Offa's court in 794 AD, a betrayal that allowed Offa to seize the kingdom outright. This act, often viewed as a piece of cold, calculating realpolitik, horrified even his contemporaries and cemented his reputation as a ruler who let nothing stand in the way of his objectives. The marginalization of Wessex. While Offa never fully annexed the rising Kingdom of Wessex, the future home of Alfred the Great, he successfully dominated its rulers, forcing them into a subordinate role and expanding Mercian influence deep into its territories. By the 780s, Offa was no longer just the king of Mercia, he was the undisputed master of all of Anglo-Saxon England south of the River Humber. This vast, centralized dominion was a feat of control unseen since the departure of the Romans 4 centuries earlier. The stability and sheer scale of his power were the prerequisites for his most audacious project. The Great Wall, Offa's Dyke. Across the western fringe of his empire lay the territories of the native Welsh, the Britons, who had been pushed westwards by the Anglo-Saxon migrations. The border between the two peoples was a frontier of constant, bloody skirmishes, cattle raiding, and tribal warfare.
The Welsh were not a unified threat, but a persistent nuisance, bleeding Mercian resources and distracting Offa from his larger ambitions. Offa's solution was Offa's Dyke, a construction project of staggering ambition, built not of stone, but of earth and muscle. A feat of engineering and manpower. The dike is not a simple trench. It is, in its best preserved sections, a composite structure. A deep western ditch, facing the Welsh territory. A steep eastern bank, rampart, built from the excavated earth and topped with a likely wooden palisade or watchtowers. The whole structure was carefully planned to give the Mercian defenders on the eastern rampart a superior field of view and a clear tactical advantage. It was a sophisticated military boundary. Scale of the project. The original structure is estimated to have run for 150 miles, 240 kilometers, but the parts generally attributed to Offa's direct control are concentrated in the central and southern sections, totaling perhaps 64 miles of continuous work. Dimensions. In places, the bank still rises 8 feet, 2.4 meters, with the ditch running another 6 feet, 1.8 meters deep. In its prime, the barrier would have been truly intimidating, a massive wall of earth rising up to 60 feet from the bottom of the western ditch to the top of the rampart. The labor force. Constructing this earthwork would have required the mobilization of a vast labor force, likely conscripted from Mercia's conquered and tributary kingdoms. This levied labor, fared system, was a hallmark of centralized, powerful kingship, a direct demonstration of Offa's authority over thousands of subjects. The alignment of the dike is as astonishing as its scale. Rather than following the most direct or geographically simple route, it often deviates to run along high ground, utilizing contours and natural barriers to maximize its defensive and observational capability. It was a line drawn with geographical mastery, a perfect marriage of military strategy and hydraulic engineering.
More than a military line. While the dike had a clear military deterrent function, its true genius lay in its political and economic impact. It was a defined boundary, a legal and psychological barrier, a statement of sovereignty. By physically drawing a line, Offa was declaring that everything to the east was Mercian land, under Mercian law, and that the Welsh intrusion would no longer be tolerated. It forced the Welsh tribes to recognize and respect a fixed border, stabilizing the frontier. Control of trade and migration. The dike was not impassable, but it was controlled. It funneled legitimate movement and trade through specific, guarded checkpoints, allowing the Mercian administration to regulate the flow of people and goods and potentially levy tolls or tariffs. Psychological impact. For the Welsh, it was a terrifying symbol of the Anglo-Saxon tide, an enduring reminder of the king who could command armies of laborers as easily as armies of warriors. It represented the end of their eastward expansionist dreams. The continental connection, the Charlemagne of Britain. Offa's ambition did not stop at the British coast. His reach extended across the English Channel, bringing him into direct, powerful contact with the greatest monarch of the age, Charlemagne, king of the Franks and future Holy Roman Emperor. Their relationship was one of grudging respect, intense rivalry, and mutual necessity. Both kings ruled vast, consolidating empires, and they recognized in each other a similar strategic genius. The currency of power, Offa's coinage. One of the most profound examples of Offa's sophistication was his monetary reform. He introduced a new, standardized silver coinage, the silver penny, or shadda in its earlier form, which would form the backbone of the English currency system for centuries. These coins were not just practical for trade, they were propaganda. Struck with Offa's portrait and titles, they circulated across Britain and Europe, literally embedding his name and image in the hands of merchants, clerics, and kings. Astonishingly, one coin, the Offa's dinar, was a direct copy of an Abbasid Caliphate gold dinar. It was stamped with the Arabic inscription that read, "There is no God but Allah alone. He has no partner," but with the legend Offa Rex crudely stamped on the reverse.
This incredible artifact suggests a level of engagement with the burgeoning Islamic world that few in Western Europe could claim, likely intended to facilitate trade or as a show of international status. Diplomatic tensions. The relationship with Charlemagne was not always smooth. At one point, their diplomatic relations frayed dramatically. Offa, seeking to cement a marriage alliance, proposed that his son Æthelberht marry one of Charlemagne's daughters. Charlemagne, in a massive power move, counter-proposed that his own son should marry one of Offa's daughters. Offa was insulted, viewing this as an attempt to treat his family as inferiors. The resulting diplomatic spat was so severe that Charlemagne banned all British ships from Frankish ports, a stunning, unprecedented embargo that highlights the seriousness of Offa's power. It was perhaps the first recorded trade war in English history. A few months later, the two rulers reconciled, exchanging gifts and pledges of friendship. But the incident proved Offa's global standing. He was treated himself as an equal to the most powerful man in Europe. The Church and legacy. Saintly aspirations. Offa understood that lasting power required not just military dominance, but also ecclesiastical authority. He sought to control the church within his domain as thoroughly as he controlled his nobles. His greatest religious achievement was the successful petition to the papacy, specifically Pope Adrian I, to establish a third archbishopric in England at Lichfield, breaking the historic dominance of Canterbury and York. This was a move of pure political calculation, designed to bring the Mercian church completely under his heel, independent of the influence of the southern kingdoms. The hand of the church. The famous letter from Alcuin of York, one of the most brilliant scholars of the age, who worked in Charlemagne's court, provides us with a critical, if biased, view of Offa's reign. Alcuin praised Offa's piety and diligence, but also spoke of his ruthlessness and the internal violence that plagued the kingdom. It is a portrait of a magnificent, successful, but ultimately feared tyrant. Offa's personal life and legacy were secured by his efforts to found and patronize religious houses, including St. Albanon's Abbey, where he was reportedly buried. He was careful to present himself as a Christian king, despite his political assassinations and violent annexations. The end of the Golden Age. Offa died in 796 AD, at the very zenith of his power. The realm he left behind was a unified, centralized, and internationally respected proto-nation. However, his work was too dependent on his sheer force of personality. His chosen successor, his son Æthelberht, was consecrated king in his lifetime, a rare Roman-style practice intended to ensure a smooth transition. Tragically, Æthelberht reigned for only 141 days before his mysterious death. With the swift collapse of the dynasty, Mercia soon began to lose its grip. The smaller kingdoms like Wessex seized the opportunity to reassert their independence, and the political center of gravity in England began its slow, inevitable shift southward. The enduring monument. Offa's Dyke remained. It survived the subsequent Viking invasions, the rise of Wessex, and the eventual unification of England. It stood as a permanent marker, a testament to the brief but brilliant Mercian supremacy, the Golden Age, that gave England its fundamental borders, its first standardized currency, and its initial burst of international prestige. Today, walking along the remaining stretches of the Dyke is to literally walk a line drawn by a king 1,200 years ago. It is to touch the edge of a forgotten empire and contemplate the astonishing, singular will of the man who built it, Offa, the king who built a wall across Britain, and briefly became the master of the West.